My House of Horrors chapter 641 to 650. Why is he walking toward me? Chen Ge was confused by the man's intention. Don't tell me he's planning to offend everyone on the bus? That doesn't sound right on this hearse. Naturally, the new passenger could not hear what Chen Ge was thinking. When his shoes landed, there were two sets of footsteps inside the bus, one in front of the other behind him. It was a very strange sound. Seeing the man walk to the back of the bus, even Chen Ge could not remain calm. After all, this young man had the curse of the red high heels on him. He moved to the side. It was not that he was afraid, but he did not want to be dragged into this mess and waste his energy. The new passenger saw Chen Ge's movement. His eyes scanned between Chen Ge and the doctor before stopping on Chen Ge with an exaggerated smile. You're afraid. The confident tone, the cold eyes, and the smile on the new passenger's face made it seem like he had everything under control. Nothing inside the bus could escape his notice. Yes, I am, Chen Ge admitted without hesitation. The more afraid you are, the more likely something bad will happen. The new passenger seemed to have finally chosen his spot. He held the bag and scissors in one hand and used his other hand to grab Chen Ge's backpack and travel bag. He did not make a move on Chen Ge but went straight for the backpack. This was the first time that Chen Ge had encountered someone like this. He frowned slightly, wondering if the new passenger had noticed that there was a ghost inside the backpack. About 2 seconds later, Chen Ge dismissed his suspicion. The new passenger reached for the backpack with a strange smile. He gripped the strap of the backpack and tried to lift it up. To everyone's surprise, the backpack did not budge at all. This scary-looking new passenger was unable to lift Chen Ge's backpack with one hand. Ha ha. Chuckling coldly, the new passenger tried again. The muscles on his arms tensed. It looked like he was using all his strength before he managed to lift Chen Ge's backpack and toss it to the ground. Bang! The contents of the bag were very heavy and fell to the ground with a dull thud. What's inside? The new passenger raised his chin and aimed the sharp end of the scissors at Chen Ge's eyes. I'm a prop maker at the amusement park. Inside the bag are the tools that I use for my daily work. They are all very common things. Chen Ge raised his hand obediently. He did the same thing when he saw the police at the crime scene to prevent unnecessary conflict. Skillful movements and sincere tone. This was clearly not the first time Chen Ge had done something like this. The new passenger was very satisfied with Chen Ge's cowardice. He scanned the whole bus and found that the young man in front of him was the easiest to bully. The new passenger stuck out his tongue and licked the wound strenuously. In the end, he sat beside Chen Ge. Slowly putting down his hands, Chen Ge turned his head to look to the side. From the tone of the new passenger just now, he thought that the other party was going to make a move. At the very least, he would open his backpack to check. Who knew that the guy was all bark and no bite? He didn't even bother to find a way out for himself and just sat down. Are you going to Liwan City as well? Chen Ge thought that this new passenger was quite interesting. He started to provoke once he got on the bus. His actions and expression were rather exaggerated, like he was afraid that people would not know that he was a crazed murderer. If not for Liwan City, who would take this last bus prepared for the dead at night? The new passenger studied Chen Ge up close. He felt like of the whole bus, only Chen Ge looked slightly more normal, like a good person. The last bus prepared for the dead. Chen Ge sucked in a cold breath. It was as if he was trying his best to hide the fear in his heart, but he still accidentally revealed his true thoughts. The emotion came from within. His facial expression did not change much, but the corner of his eyes twitched and his pupils twitched. The new passenger was getting more and more satisfied with Chen Ge. He liked people who were weaker than him. What is your name? My name is Chen Ge. I work at a theme park. What about you? Chen Ge shrunk his body to the side. As if realizing that the question might anger the man, he quickly added, It's fine if you don't want to tell me, I'm just asking. You can call me Scissors. I'm going to Liwan City to look for someone, a dead person. Chen Ge did not even ask for the rest of the story, but the new passenger had said it on his own. I'm also going there to look for someone. A friend of mine went missing, and the last message he left me was about this bus. Initially, I did not believe it until I saw this bus with my own eyes. When I got on the bus, I hesitated for a long time. Chen Ge's description was very detailed, but the doctor sitting in front of him thought it sounded familiar. He realized that Chen Ge seemed to have adapted the high school student's story and used it on himself. Looks like I'm not the only one with similar experiences. The sickly smile on Scissors' face slowly disappeared. He fell into deep thought. When he was subconsciously thinking, the expression on his face returned to normal. This should be how he looked in his daily life. We're all the same. Chen Ge lowered his head, pretending to tie his shoelaces. His fingers silently brushed past the fresh blood that accidentally landed on his shoes when the new passenger waved Scissors. Rubbing his fingers together, Chen Ge sniffed it. His 5 senses were far sharper than a normal person's, but even so, he could not smell the scent of blood. It's not blood. This time, Chen Ge was even more certain. Normally, carrying a large bag of dead bodies, unless they had been treated with plastic wrap or activated charcoal, there would definitely be a strange smell. This man should be similar to the doctor, a normal person who went to Liwan City to look for sustenance. Chen Ge could understand the new passenger's strange behavior. He knew that the bus was dangerous, and he knew that the place he was going to was filled with ghosts and murderers. Therefore, he, like a sheep, put on the skin of a wolf, hoping to blend in with the crowd. No matter how a sheep disguises itself, it's still a sheep. Chen Ge looked at the man's clean hands and shook his head slightly. He grumbled internally, holding the scissors like this, if there's a conflict, I might injure myself. In an intense fight, I won't have the chance to cut my enemy, so I might as well hold the scissors close to the back and use them like a sharp awl. This man who called himself Scissors had too many flaws. A normal person might be spooked by his scary appearance and sickly tone, but not Chen Ge. He was a haunted house operator, and from a professional perspective, Scissors had too many flaws. Scissors did not pose much of a threat, so Chen Ge turned his attention to the other passengers. They were about to reach Liwan City, so he could not allow these passengers to do whatever they wanted. Before he could come up with a plan, something happened. The phone in Chen Ge's pocket suddenly vibrated. After Chen Ge put on the earpiece to answer it, Fan Dade's voice came from the other end. Mr. Chen, I've discovered a problem. The door to the living room is open, and I went out to take a look. There are only upward footprints in the stairwell and no downward footprints. That thing might still be inside the room. Should I leave this building as soon as possible? There are only upward footprints? That's right. I feel that something is different today. Everything I look at feels weird. Mr. Chen, where are you now? I'm really going crazy. Hold on for a little longer, I'll be there soon. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. We can't stay in this house any longer. Mr. Chen, I'll wait for you downstairs. Fan Dade spoke quickly. The footprints in the stairwell made him panic, and the sound of his hurried footsteps came from the other end of the phone. Don't move. He might be hiding in the stairwell. Tell me the size and pattern of the shoes. Before Chen Ge finished, the phone was hung up. When a person is frightened, it is possible for them to do something irrational. I wonder if that was the case with Fan Dade. Putting the phone away, Chen Ge picked up the backpack from the ground and kept his eyes on the road. The next stop is Liwan City. I'm already there. Where are you? The darkness and the rain blocked out everything. No one would have guessed that the monsters that lived in the shadows had all gathered at one of the small towns at the edge of the city. Liwan City was just ahead. The driver, Tang Jun, stepped on the pedal and the old bus rushed through the rain, picking up speed. The windows were battered by the rain, and the bus felt like it was going to fall apart, but the passengers on the bus did not care about that. When that blurry silhouette appeared, everyone held their breath. Lightning flashed across the night sky, and the flash of light revealed several shadows moving through the darkness. Those shadows also saw the bus on Route 104 that was rushing toward them. We're almost there. The doctor was the first to stand up from his seat. He noticed that the atmosphere on the bus was different from normal, and he did not want to stay on the bus for even a second longer. Hey, let's go together. The doctor whispered to Chen Ge and the man nicknamed Scissors. There's a dangerous passenger ahead. The 3 of us will get off the bus together. I'm not going to lie to you. After we get off the bus, we'll run in 3 different directions. As for who he will go after, that will be up to fate. A person who could survive on the bus was not to be underestimated, So the doctor did not hide his plan and shared it with them. Chen Ge and Scissors did not reply. Scissors was worried that the doctor was not a good person, and he was worried that he would become the man's prey once he was alone. Chen Ge, on the other hand, had his own plan. He planned to drive the bus directly into Fan Kong's residential area and drag the red high heels and the smiling man with him to force their way through the trap set up by the shadow and rescue Fan Kong, who held the key clue. It was easy to get on Chen Ge's bus, but it was difficult to get off. In a way, this bus was much more dangerous than when he was serving the shadow. When he reached the exit, the doctor gripped the handrail tightly. He had heard the story about the smiling man, so he decided to find a place to hide the moment he got out of the car. The bus on Route 104 had already entered Liwan City, and it was getting closer to the bus stop at the edge of the small town. The doctor's heart was in his throat. He gripped the handrail tightly, tensed the muscles in his legs, and lowered his weight, preparing to rush out the moment the door opened. The plan was perfect, but the reality caught him off guard. The bus on Route 104 did not stop when it passed the bus stop. In fact, it did not even slow down and continued to rush forward. "We're not stopping," green veins popped on the doctor's forehead. He knew that something bad was going to happen that night. The bus did not stop at the stop that it was supposed to. Other than Chen Ge, all the passengers turned to look at the driver. Tang Jun was under a lot of pressure, and his body was shaking. He had no idea what would be waiting for him. He was merely following his boss's orders and driving forward. "Why aren't you stopping the bus?" "Hey," among the family of three, the middle-aged man stood up from his seat, and his face was dark. The boy sitting next to him also raised his head and looked around surreptitiously. He did not understand the world of adults, and he had a feeling that everything was too complicated. "Stop the bus. Stop the bus now." The middle-aged man walked toward the driver's seat. Seeing this, Chen Ge grabbed his backpack and walked out. He kept his head lowered, and all the passengers thought that he was also going to talk to the driver about something. Seeing that Chen Ge was going to stand up for him, the doctor followed behind Chen Ge to ask for the reason. "Can't you hear me?" No matter what the middle-aged man asked, the driver refused to answer. His face was as pale as it could be. "I'm telling you again, turn the bus back now, don't go any further." Tang Jun ignored the middle-aged man and focused on driving. "If you want to die, don't drag us down with you. You can't go any further." This was probably not the middle-aged man's first visit to Liwan City. He knew some inside information, and he raised his leg to slam on the brake. "Friend, what you're doing is illegal." An arm curled around the middle-aged man's neck, and Chen Ge dragged him to the smiling man. "Let go. You have no idea what's ahead. Let go of me," the middle-aged man screamed and struggled. "Don't go any further, that's not where we should be. Looks like you know something. Why don't you share it with us?" "Fog, red fog. Once you go in, you won't be able to come out. Stop him." The middle-aged man screamed as he rushed toward the driver's seat, but he was once again stopped by Chen Ge. "What fog? Tell me more." Chen Ge was interrogating the middle-aged man when he realized that the bus had slowed down. The doctor patted his shoulder lightly, and he lifted his head to look in the direction that the doctor was pointing. Before him was a very strange scene. Half of the city was covered in rain, and there was no light. It was plunged into darkness and despair. The other half did not have a single drop of rain. The blood fog swirled, and it was filled with various negative emotions. This is the scene behind the door. Chen Ge had entered the world behind the door many times, but he swore that this was the first time he had seen such a large blood fog in the real world. This is too similar to the world behind the door. This is unbelievable. The shock in Chen Ge's heart was indescribable. The whole of Liwan City had been split into two. One was covered in rain, and the other was shrouded in blood fog. There is a door in Liwan City that has gone out of control. Is this the result of the door going out of control? The city has been swallowed, and the nightmare has become reality? In the rainy night after midnight, Liwan City revealed its true appearance. In the 3-star trial mission that Chen Ge had done before, the world behind the door corresponded to a building shrouded in blood fog, but now, what Chen Ge saw was a small town shrouded in blood fog. "Do not go in there." No matter how the middle-aged man yelled, the bus did not stop. Tang Jun turned to look at Chen Ge through the rear-view mirror. The courageous Chen Ge signaled him to continue moving with his back facing the other passengers. After receiving the order, Tang Jun stopped hesitating and stepped on the gas pedal to the floor. This boss of his looked gentle and kind, but in reality, he was a madman scarier than the shadow. Compared to the blood fog, he was more afraid of his boss. The speed of the bus suddenly picked up without warning. The sound of high heels echoed inside the bus. The smiling man stood up from his seat with a frozen face, but both of them were one step too late. The bus on Route 104 plunged into the blood fog and sped down the foggy street. When the bus crashed into the blood fog, the sound of high heels disappeared, and the smiling man's expression froze. The situation was spiraling out of control, and it was heading in a direction that no one knew. The rain slid down the window, and when the fog touched the bus, it would turn into small blood vessels that stuck to the exterior of the bus. The old bus was slowly being dyed red. Turning to look, the road that they had come from had been swallowed by the blood fog. Even if they turned back now, it appeared like they would not be able to go back. This place is different from the world behind the door. The buildings in the fog have not turned completely red, so there should be a process of erosion. As the leader, Chen Ge was the calmest. His fingers were outside his pocket, and when the bus charged into the blood fog, the black phone vibrated several times. The situation was unclear, and things could easily change, so he did not plan to take out the phone to check it. He decided to wait until they were at a safe place. Following Chen Ge's instructions, Tang Jun headed toward the residential area where Fan Kong's home was. However, as more and more blood fog stuck to the bus started to slow down. Even if Tang Jun stepped on the gas pedal, he could not change it. What is going on? All the passengers needed an explanation, and the pressure on Tang Jun increased. He had listened to Chen Ge, but now the anger of the passengers was all focused on him. Gripping the steering wheel, Tang Jun was worried that Chen Ge would abandon him. Offending the smiling man in the red high heels for a ghost who knew how to drive was obviously not worth it. The bus slowed down, and this was not good news for Tang Jun. He had not completed the mission that his boss had given him, and he had to face the wrath of the passengers. He did not know about Chen Ge's plan, and he had never asked about it. It would be a lie to say that he did not regret it. "Where are you taking us?" The middle-aged man's face darkened. He struggled free from Chen Ge's grasp and stepped on the brake again. This time, Chen Ge did not stop him. The bus had already slowed down, so stopping the man was pointless. "Stop the bus." The middle-aged man stepped on the brake, and his hands started to fight for the steering wheel again. Out of driving instinct, Tang Jun gritted his teeth and pushed the man away. The wheel turned, and the hearse veered off the road toward the railing. "Be careful," Chen Ge shouted and took over the middle-aged man's position. With his back facing all the passengers, he gestured for Tang Jun to open the door and leave immediately. Tang Jun understood what Chen Ge meant. He decided to trust Chen Ge one last time. After Chen Ge grasped the steering wheel, he decisively opened the door and jumped out. "You want to run?" Chen Ge's voice was louder than anyone else's. He stepped on the brakes and rushed out of the bus without waiting for the bus to stop. "Stop right there!" He shouted loudly and rushed out after them. "Stop chasing! Come back!" The doctor knew that the blood fog was very dangerous. He wanted to stop it, but he didn't succeed. Turning a corner, Chen Ge shouted for Tang Jun not to run, but he reached out to open the zipper of his backpack and put Tang Jun back into the comic. "Stop chasing!" The doctor's voice came from behind. Chen Ge ran a few more steps before returning to the car. "Where's the driver?" The middle-aged man's face was dark. He didn't catch up. This should have been premeditated. He even planned out the escape route. Just as Chen Ge said that, the middle-aged man rushed over and grabbed him by the collar. "It's all your fault. If you didn't stop me earlier, the bus wouldn't have driven into the fog." Quote, "It's my fault. You should know how fast the bus was going. What if you fought for the steering wheel with the driver and the bus crashed into the building next to it?" Chen Ge had a point. Damn it, damn it. The middle-aged man slammed his fist on the armrest. He gripped his hair in pain, and his expression was filled with despair. "To escape from these things, I offered my daughter. Today, I brought my son here because of this, but now it's all over." "Offered your daughter?" Chen Ge's brows creased slightly. He had met many bad people in his life, but this was the first time he had come across someone like this middle-aged man. The middle-aged man was on the verge of a mental breakdown. He wanted to vent the anger in his heart, and the kind-looking Chen Ge became the target of his anger. Various vulgarities escaped from his lips. In stark contrast to the middle-aged man, Chen Ge appeared to be very cultured. His eyes moved past the middle-aged man to look at the boy who was scared out of his wits. There were several bruises on the boy's arm. He wanted to look but did not dare. He kept his head lowered, and his eyes occasionally glanced up. How could you be so cruel to such a good boy? I'm doing this for his own good. If we can't escape from that scary thing, my whole family will die. The middle-aged man became angrier. He grabbed Chen Ge's collar again. It's all because of you. You've used other people's despair to save your own, and you'll only get deeper despair. Only by solving the problem at its root can you truly find relief. Chen Ge pressed on the middle-aged man's hand. This is the second time you've grabbed my collar. I hope there won't be a third time. It's pointless for us to fight among ourselves. We'd better come up with a solution. The doctor stepped forward to mediate. He separated Chen Ge from the middle-aged man. The driver's sudden change of direction to drive the bus into the blood fog must have been ordered by someone. I've driven this bus many times, and there have been no accidents. The driver is just a small fry. The real culprit is someone else. The doctor's analysis was accurate, but due to the difference in information, his general direction was wrong. The last bus on Route 104 crosses Zhejiang and connects the eastern and western Zhejiang. It serves the master of Liwan City. The reason we were sent into the blood fog is probably that person's order. There is probably something or someone on the bus that he needs. Yes, that's what I think as well. Even if the bus stopped outside the house, the person would have other ways to force us into the fog. Chen Ge stood next to the doctor with his backpack. The master of Liwan City. You sure know a lot of things. Seeing that the doctor was siding with Chen Ge, the middle-aged man did not dare take on the two of them on his own, and his tone weakened. Then, tell me more about this so-called master. What is he planning? Probably to deal with someone. The doctor's words caused Chen Ge's heart to skip a beat. He turned to look and realized that the doctor was staring at the smiling man. Every one of us has our own secrets. For example, the man beside you. He once massacred an entire bus of passengers and ruined the plan of the mastermind in Liwan City. The doctor exposed the smiling man's secret. Maintaining the creepy smile, the smiling man craned his neck, and his eyes that were filled with black lines looked at the doctor. I killed a whole car of people, including the driver. I didn't leave a single survivor. How did you know about this? Facing the questioning from the smiling man, the doctor was very calm, like he had already considered this question. He moved behind Brother Chen and pulled the scarf up. The information about you was given to me by a friend of mine. Then how did your friend find out about this? The smiling man's secret had been exposed, and the smile on his face bloomed like a flower. Be it his tone or his demeanor, they were completely different from before. Perhaps the man would only be happy when he was killing someone. You only killed all the passengers inside the bus. My friend witnessed everything from outside the bus. Is that so? Then where is he now? Quote, he's already dead. After entering the ghost apartment, he never came out again. Hearing the doctor say that the insider was already dead, the smiling man's expression changed subtly, like he was feeling sorry for the dead man. I managed to keep him alive last time, but it doesn't matter. This time, I'll take a closer look. The smiling man stopped hiding his murderous intent. He walked down the aisle, and black lines surfaced under his skin like black veins. Is this man a human or a ghost? The middle-aged man knew that the smiling man was not someone to be trifled with. He abandoned his wife and child who were sitting behind the smiling man and ran to the front door alone, preparing to escape at any moment. Calm down. Even if you kill us, you won't be able to escape. Just like the doctor said, the real target of the mastermind is you. We're all dragged into this mess because of you. Chen Ge stood before the doctor to protect him. We're all in the same boat. Killing each other will only benefit the mastermind. Why don't we work together to deal with whatever might happen next? His fingers gripped the backpack, and Chen Ge's palms were sweating. Xu Yin had warned him before that this smiling man was very dangerous. When the doctor spoke, the smiling man did not hide his murderous intent, but when it was Chen Ge who spoke, he hesitated, but only for a moment. You have a point, but why should I do as you say? The black lines under the smiling man's skin connected like a net, trying to fish out his flesh and blood. For a normal person, this pain would have been unbearable, but the smiling man not only did not show pain, he smiled even more brightly than before. He seemed to have gotten used to the pain. His hands reached for his lips. This heart-wrenching pain slowly made him drop his disguise. As his bones grew taller, his neck, which was already unnaturally long, became even longer. Perhaps you think killing us is easy, but don't forget, there is a pair of high heels on the bus, and the owner of the shoes is currently following behind one of the passengers. I know you have the power to kill all of us, but what benefit will that bring you? The mention of the red high heels caused the smiling man to restrain himself slightly. His hand that reached to the corner of his lips stopped moving. We're not enemies. You've killed a whole bus of people before, and you has made a grudge with the mastermind behind all of this, but what does that have to do with us? In order to deal with you, the mastermind has dragged us as well. In other words, we are the mastermind. God, we have a common enemy. Chen Ge pointed at the blood fog outside. The road that we came from has disappeared. We know nothing about this world, and no one knows what will happen next. In this situation, do you really have the confidence to escape this place alone? Quote. The blood in the fog stuck to the window, and the old bus was already dyed red. There's no time to think. If you don't agree, we can only fight with our lives on the line. Even if we can't defeat you, we can at least bite off a few pieces of your flesh before we die. Chen Ge touched the handle of the hammer through the backpack. He had no idea whether the smiling man would cooperate with them or not, so he had to be prepared. No one spoke inside the bus, and it became quiet. The smiling man seemed to be weighing the pros and cons. Just as they were nervous, a loud bang came from the middle of the bus. What the f***ck? Where are we now? The drunkard tumbled down from the seat and crashed to the ground. He looked out the window. The thick blood fog had covered all the buildings, and he instantly woke up. With the drunkard's action, the atmosphere in the bus lightened. The black threads under the smiling man's skin slowly disappeared, and his body returned to normal. It was like nothing had happened earlier, and the smiling man returned to his seat. What's going on? The drunkard pinched his face harshly. I was just taking a nap. Where did you take me? Where's the driver? Where's the driver? Quote. The driver has already jumped out of the bus. We have no idea where we are, but one thing is for sure, this place is very dangerous. Chen Ge saw the smiling man return to his seat, and he sighed in relief. For Chen Ge, it was a good thing that they did not turn on each other. After all, he planned to borrow the smiling man's power to deal with the shadow. The driver has jumped out of the bus. Wait a minute, I'm a bit confused. Let me sort this out. The drunkard counted on his fingers. I was drinking, and after I was done, I was waiting for the bus at the bus stop. I appeared to have fallen asleep, and when I woke up, I was just in time for the last bus. There's nothing wrong with that. The drunkard reeked of alcohol, and his voice was nasal. He had a lisp, and his words were slurred. By the way, why did the driver jump out of the bus? Did you run into a carjacking? Why didn't you wake me up for something so serious? Quote. If the robbers had gone to rob Chen Ge's bus, they would have been the luckiest person in the world. We didn't run into a carjacking, but this situation is 10 times scarier than a robber. Chen Ge did not give the drunkard the cold shoulder just because he looked like a normal person. He was friendly with everyone. There might be murderers hiding inside the blood fog. If you're alone and you're caught by them, you might be sliced into pieces. Them. Sliced into pieces. No, I need to call the police. The drunkard took out his phone, but after they entered the blood fog, there was no signal. The fog has blocked the signal. Save your energy. If we don't escape from the fog, we'll all die here. After comforting the drunkard, Chen Ge turned to the others. The bus is too conspicuous to stop in the middle of the road. I think we should find a place to hide and observe in the dark before deciding on the next step of the plan. I have no objections. The doctor was the first to agree, and the other passengers followed suit. Okay, then let's get off the bus. If we keep staying at the same spot, I have a feeling that something might come. Chen Ge picked up his backpack and the travel bag with the white cat and was the first to get off the bus. He used yin-yang vision to scan the surrounding buildings, and his expression was strange. I've seen these buildings in Xiaobu's game before. At the time, to get to the first save point, Chen Ge had almost run through all the streets in the game. The game corresponds to real life, which is very beneficial to me. He had memorized all the roads, and the interference of the blood fog on Chen Ge was minimized. The door of Liwan City had gone out of control. The blood fog swallowed half of the town, and the border between reality and nightmare blurred. Chen Ge had no idea whether he was inside the door or outside it. Under the cover of the blood fog, blood vessels started to appear on the surface of all the buildings. If we keep going, we'll reach the building where Tong Tong's body was found. Should I go upstairs to check the water tank? In real life, Tong Tong's body had been taken away by the police. If there was another body inside the tank, it meant that Chen Ge was probably inside the world behind the door. The world behind the door was made from the door pusher's memory. As long as there was Tong Tong's body in Xiaobu's memory, there should be a body inside the tank. Of course, this was just Chen Ge's speculation. He did not have a better way to verify it. The residential area where Fan Kong lives is with Xiaobu's student, and it's quite far from here. If I want to go there, I'll run into some things. Chen Ge looked behind him. He was surrounded by blood fog, and the road that he came from had disappeared. This world that was covered in blood fog appeared to be a place where one could only enter but not leave. If this is really the world behind the door, the only way to leave the world behind the door is through the door. The door to Liwan City is inside the building opposite Fan Kong's home. Looks like no matter the reason, I'll have to go to his home's residential area tonight. After coming up with an excuse for himself, Chen Ge planned to share his analysis with the other passengers and drag them to the residential area. I'm giving them directions to save them. More blood vessels appeared on the surface of the bus. The fog seemed to have a life of its own, slowly consuming everything that was around it. What are you mumbling about? The passengers got off the bus one after another. The doctor sidled up to Chen Ge. Later, we'll stick together. No matter what happens, don't separate. Okay. Chen Ge turned to look at the car. The drunkard and the family of three were squeezed together, the smiling man stood alone at the side, and the murderer who called himself Scissors stood at the back. Before ensuring that the buildings are safe, you'd better stay away from these buildings. There's no telling when scary things will pop out from inside, like bloody arms or flying heads. Chen Ge had seen similar scenarios in Xiaobu's games, so he was very experienced. Are you kidding me? The drunkard had completely woken up. He had been scared out of his wits. If he could leave Liwan City alive that day, he would probably never drink again. I'm just spouting nonsense. I don't know what exactly will happen, but it might be even scarier than what I said. Chen Ge pointed at the building where the phone's body was. Let's go and take a look. We'll search floor by floor. After confirming that there's no danger, we'll hide inside. You seem to know this place very well. The middle-aged man's face was dark, and his tone was full of distrust. There are so many buildings around, why do you have to go to that building? Don't tell me you've set up a trap there. Quote. You're overthinking it. Chen Ge smiled at the middle-aged man. To kill you, there's no need for a trap. The middle-aged man's expression shifted instantly. Chen Ge waved his hands. I'm just joking. I've never killed a chicken in my entire life. The only reason I'm able to maintain my composure now is because I've been playing horror games for a long time. Chen Ge turned around and pointed at the building that he had chosen. There has to be a reason why I want you to go to this building. As the saying goes, know yourself and know your enemy, and you'll never be defeated. We'll hide inside the building first and observe the bus outside through the window. The mastermind has lured us into the blood fog, so he'll definitely send someone to investigate. At the very least, we need to know our opponent's appearance and ability before we can come up with a plan. Furthermore, the fog is thick, and the visibility is low. If we're too close to the bus, we might be discovered, but if we're too far away, we won't be able to see anything. In conclusion, I think that building is the most suitable. Quote. When he said that, even the smiling man nodded subconsciously. The middle-aged man could not argue with that, but he still felt unsettled. You lead the way, and we'll follow behind. No problem, but you'd better not wander off. Chen Ge agreed easily. He carried the two large bags and walked at the front, and the doctor followed closely behind him. There's definitely something wrong with this man. The middle-aged man pulled on his wife's arm. His wife was like a puppet, allowing him to do whatever he wanted. She did not resist at all. I think he has a point. Seeing that the family of 3 did not move, the drunkard did not move either. From his perspective, this family of 3 was the least threatening, so he decided to stay with them. Listen, there's no problem. When we get there, it'll be too late for regrets. We'd better be careful. The middle-aged man picked up the boy. They walked toward Chen Ge, but they maintained a certain distance. The smiling man was still the same, but he did not choose to follow Chen Ge. Instead, he walked to the other side of the road alone. The blood fog was thick, and the people on this side of the road could only see a blurry figure. Scissors was at the back of the group. His face was pale, and with every step he took, there would be 2 footsteps. The group moved through the blood fog. When Chen Ge arrived at the building, someone tugged on his shirt. He turned back to look and saw the doctor pull down his scarf. He whispered, "It's best not to enter the buildings inside the blood fog. It's fine if they're empty, but I'm afraid there might be something living inside." "It's fine, I'll be careful." Chen Ge realized that the doctor was very knowledgeable. It was as if he had been to the world behind the door before. The 2 of them entered the apartment building one after another. The corridor was pitch black, and the walls were peeling. There was also a bloody mist that permeated the corridor. Just staying inside was enough to make one feel uncomfortable. Creak. The wooden door that gave off a strange smell was pushed open. Chen Ge did not miss any room. "Do you really plan to explore every room?" The doctor had a strange expression on his face. "What if we run into something? Actively looking for them is better than them suddenly appearing to find us." Chen Ge moved very fast. He did not stop for even a moment, like he did not know the meaning of fear. He soon arrived at the highest floor of the building. At the bottom of the building, the drunkard and the family of 3 were still lingering on the first floor. The group huddled together, not knowing whether they should move up or not. "The guy seems to have run to the top floor already." The drunkard stood next to the stairs and looked up through the gap in the stairwell. "Let's not go up. We'll stay on the first floor. We can escape at any moment." The middle-aged man was also very cowardly. "Daddy," the child in his arms seemed to have noticed something, and he stared at the dark corridor behind the middle-aged man. "Okay, I'll listen to you." The drunkard was still looking up. The light was too dim, and he squinted his eyes. For some reason, he felt like there was something protruding out from one of the stairs, but it was unclear whether it was a decoration or something else. "Let him lead the way, and we'll guard the back." The middle-aged man wanted to say something else, but the child in his arms called out softly again. "Daddy." "What's that? I can hear you. Keep it down." Quote, "The handle of the door in the corridor is moving. Look, it's right there." The boy raised his hand and pointed down the corridor. The wife, the middle-aged man, and the drunkard, who had been silent, all turned to look at where the boy was pointing. A strange sound came from the end of the dark corridor. The doorknob of one of the rooms was shaking like there was something locked inside the room, and it was trying to get out. In the eerily quiet residential building, the lock of the door shook on its own, which made everyone's hearts jump. "I saw the leader walk up the stairs, so the people inside the room can't be passengers." The more the middle-aged man thought about it, the more afraid he became. "I've been to Liwan City before. How should I say this? Sometimes you see things in this place that are hard to explain scientifically." Quote. "For example." "You don't want to hear about those examples. All we can do is avoid them." "What if I can't avoid it?" The drunkard leaned against the wall, and his eyes were glued to the end of the corridor. "If I can't avoid it, I'll pretend that I don't see them and try to act normal. Then, I'll tell myself that it's all just a psychological effect." The middle-aged man's face paled even more. He was reminded of some bad memories. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead, and his face could not have looked worse. "The Liwan City that I went to was different from the current Liwan City. There was no red fog, and something new has happened here. Don't scare me, son of AB*TCH. Why do I feel like someone is blowing in my ear, and it seems to be a woman's voice?" The drunkard whipped his head around to look behind him. The murderer, who called himself Scissors, was walking down the stairs. With every step he took, there would be 2 footsteps. His expression was very strange. It was a man's face, but after looking at it for a long time, it felt like the facial features belonged to a woman. The man did not follow them into the corridor. Instead, he walked forward. Is he a man? Or a woman? This strange feeling made the drunkard instantly nervous. He patted the middle-aged man's shoulder lightly. Someone just passed by. Did I? When the middle-aged man turned back to look, the corridor was already covered in blood fog. He could not see anything. Ignore him. We need to protect ourselves first. While he was still in a daze, the trembling of the doorknob in the corridor disappeared, and everything returned to normal. The blood mist thickened, and the surroundings became even more eerie. One could vaguely hear the sound of wind blowing through the hollow, making one's hair stand on end. Has the person inside the door given up? The drunkard held the banister. He stood at the entrance, ready to run out at any moment. Not necessarily. It's also possible that the thing has already escaped from the house. The middle-aged man bent down and took out a phone from his pocket. The drunkard noticed that the phone the middle-aged man was using was an old model from several years ago. He adjusted the screen to the brightest and held it in front of him. There seemed to be something extra in the dark corridor, but because he was too far away, he couldn't tell what it was. How strange. The middle-aged man nudged the drunkard with his elbow. I feel like the corridor is different from before. Come and take a look. The wind whistled past his ears like a madman talking to himself. The drunkard accepted the middle-aged man's phone and studied it closely. There really seems to be one more thing. He involuntarily took a step forward and frowned. Broken ceilings, peeling walls, closed doors, and all sorts of junk piled up in the corners. The drunkard suddenly looked in a certain direction. What did you find? The middle-aged man hurried over and looked in the direction that the drunkard was looking at. There was nothing out of place, there were no ghosts or dead bodies like he expected. I'm not sure. Wait a minute. The driver returned the phone to the middle-aged man. He took out his own phone and switched on the flashlight. The light was twisted in the blood fog, and it was still hard to see clearly. The door that made the noise just now was that door. The drunkard suppressed his fear and moved forward. He shrunk his neck, and his arms leaned against the wall. After a few steps, he finally saw the extra thing. A mop. There was an extra mop in the corridor. It was the kind that was commonly seen in real life, and someone had left it there. It's just a mop. Are you trying to scare me to death? The middle-aged man took a deep breath and put the boy down. His arms were sore. The drunkard sighed in relief. He scratched his head embarrassedly. I was too nervous, but I don't think there was a mop in the corridor earlier, right? I think there was. I can't remember. The middle-aged man and the drunkard stood together, and they continued to look forward with the help of the light from the phone. Under the illumination of the light, the drunkard who was about to move forward suddenly stopped. He asked the middle-aged man next to him with uncertainty, was the mop in that position earlier? I remember it was in the third room from the back. How come it feels like it has moved forward by one room? Quote. Is that so? The middle-aged man also turned to look at the mop. With both of them watching, the mop that was commonly seen in real life suddenly moved. The black cloth started to move, and a human face slowly appeared from underneath it. The drunkard and the middle-aged man did not expect something like this to happen. Their limbs were cold, and before they could react, the mop started to fly toward them. When they got closer, everyone could see that it wasn't a mop at all. It was a human head with long hair. Run! The drunkard grabbed the phone and started to run. The middle-aged man ignored his wife and child and ran madly. The boy was spooked, and he started to cry until he was picked up by his mother. Hurried footsteps echoed inside the building. The drunkard was the first to reach the stairs. He hesitated for a moment, wondering whether he should go upstairs to find Chen Ge or run out of the building. He lifted his head to look up the stairs. Strands of black hair fell on his face, and a pale face was reaching down from the second-floor banister. With a scream, he couldn't care less about anything else as he ran outside. The street was covered in blood fog, a city where reality and nightmares intertwined. Every building was like a man-eating monster. His heart pounding, the drunkard did not dare to stop. He yelled at the middle-aged man behind him, "Run this way." Then he ran into a two-story building next to him. The courtyard outside the building was open, and the flowers and plants inside were all wilted. The most eye-catching thing was a large kennel at the innermost part of the courtyard. It was built with iron railings and moldy wooden boards, and there were various bite marks on it. Other than the small building, the kennel was the only other hiding place. The sound of footsteps and a woman's laughter came from outside. The drunkard's mind was a mess, and he felt like he was not safe anywhere. He hurried to the kennel. It's very dangerous inside the building, and we might run into some dirty things. I'd better hide here and observe the situation. The drunkard held onto the wooden board above the kennel. He was about to crawl into it, but before he could do so, he was hit by a horrible stench. So smelly. The drunkard had completely sobered up. He covered his nose and mouth as he shone his phone at the dog kennel. To his surprise, there was nothing dirty inside. It looks so clean, but why is it so smelly? Even the raw meat at my place wouldn't smell this bad. Quote. Resisting the nausea, the drunkard picked up a tree branch and poked at the soil inside the kennel. There's nothing buried down there, right? Where is the stench coming from? How come it feels like it has seeped into the wooden planks? Quote. The footsteps got closer, and the drunkard took a step back. He could not stand this foul odor anymore, so he jumped into the building through the window. Hopefully, the family of 3 won't lead the monster here. The drunkard regretted asking the middle-aged man to come with him in the first place. Wouldn't that expose his location? Holding his head, the drunkard squatted under the windowsill. He pinched himself again. This is definitely not a dream. What was that thing earlier? How could it run so fast with just its head? Was it using its chin to move? Quote. From the drunkard's perspective, the family of 3 was most likely dead, so he did not plan to save them. Other than me, the rest of the passengers on the bus are probably dead already. No one dares to face that thing, so no one. His head was still spinning, and the drunkard was covered in cold sweat. What should I do now? There's no signal on my phone, and I don't even know where I am. Oh well, I'll just hide here until the fog disperses. Quote. The drunkard learned from his mistake, and he did not dare to wander around anymore. He squatted under the window and waited for several minutes before he heard the door to the courtyard creak. Someone's coming in. Holding his breath, the drunkard did not dare to breathe. He perked up his ears to listen. After the door creaked, the courtyard soon became quiet again. I just came in to take a look. The monster didn't notice me. This time, the drunkard was smarter. He did not raise his head to look out the window. He was afraid that he might see someone looking in through the window. Turning on his phone, the drunkard adjusted the angle and used the camera function to look at the courtyard outside. The door was half open, and there was no one in the courtyard. That's the silver lining. The drunkard stood up, and when he pulled his phone back, he accidentally knocked against the bottle on the windowsill. Air freshener. The drunkard placed the bottle back and did not think too much about it. Straightening his back, the drunkard finally had time to observe his surroundings. He did not know if it was an illusion, but he felt like he could hear a faint sound in his ears, like the sound of a wind chime. Some people in the countryside had the habit of hanging wind chimes at the door. As long as the wind chimes rang, it meant that someone had entered the house. If it was any other time, the drunkard wouldn't have noticed the noise, but it was different now. He kept feeling that there was something walking back and forth at the entrance, and it was moving very fast. His heart raced at the thought that there were other things in the house. His footsteps moved on the floor. The drunkard was facing away from the window, and he felt like the room behind him had suddenly darkened, like the light from the window had been blocked by something. There was someone standing outside the window. When this thought appeared in his mind, the drunkard's scalp felt like it was going to explode. His body froze on the spot, and the sound of the wind chimes continued to ring in his ears, becoming clearer and clearer. What was approaching? The drunkard mustered up all his courage to look back, but the window was empty. Was it a false alarm? He retreated to the window. When his fingers touched the windowsill, he felt a prickle in his hand. Using the light from his phone, he realized that there was a lot of black dog fur around the gap of the windowsill. Paw! The window on the second floor was pushed open with a creak. The drunkard's body shuddered, and the dog fur in his palm fluttered to the ground. He had heard it very clearly. The sound of the window opening was right above his head. He had no idea whether this was a coincidence or someone playing a prank on him. He did not dare jump out the window, but he felt like it was not safe to stay inside the house. While he was conflicted, more dog fur fluttered down from above his head. Why is there so much dog fur? He was reminded of the empty kennel in the courtyard and the thick stench. What's going on? The drunkard did not dare raise his head to look up. He was not curious about what was watching him from the second floor. At that moment, he just wanted to be left alone. I can't waste any more time. I have to leave. Just as the drunkard made that decision in his heart, the door to the courtyard was pushed open again. In the dark, something that looked like a mop was stuck at the door. Seeing the face that was hidden behind the black hair and the rags, the drunkard's heart felt like it was submerged in ice water. He did not even bother to close the window and hurried to leave this room that was close to the courtyard. Damn, why would he appear at a time like this? The drunkard ran into the corridor, and the sound of the wind chime came from the end of the corridor. Several pairs of broken slippers littered the floor, and the room was rather messy. The dog fur earlier came from the second floor, and there are also some unclean things on the second floor of this house. I can't go to the second floor, and I'd better stay away from the stairs. Quote. The drunkard took a deep breath to calm himself down. He crept into the room furthest away from the stairs. The floorboards creaked strangely, and a strange child's singing came from somewhere. It sounded like someone had touched a recorder left behind by a dead person, and the room became stranger and stranger. Among the slippers that I saw in the corridor earlier, there were adults and children, so there might be more than one thing in this room. The more he thought about it, the more afraid he became. The drunkard's back was wet, and his body was cold. Hopefully, they won't come in. Closing the door lightly, the drunkard saw several empty bottles lying behind the door. They looked similar to the bottles on the windowsill. Why are there so many air fresheners in this room? He tossed the bottles to the side and realized that there were bags of deodorant and perfume in the corner of the room. Why are there so many deodorants? What happened in this room? The drunkard could not help but be reminded of the dog kennel that reeked of foul odor. The kennel is clean, but it's filled with foul odor. A living person's room is messy, but it's filled with fragrance. There has to be something wrong here. He looked around. This should be a young man's bedroom. There were some fashion magazines and fitness books on the bed, and there were dumbbells and scales under the table. The layout of the room could not have been more normal, but after a closer inspection, the drunkard's heart was enveloped by an indescribable fear. He opened the bottom drawer of the study table, and inside it was a thick stack of pictures. They recorded various scenes of animal abuse, and it was chilling to look at. However, that was not the scariest part. The drunkard continued to flip through the pictures. The top 1/4 of the pictures was a young man who did not show his face abusing an animal, and in the remaining 3/4 of the pictures, the young man was the one being abused. Are these people abusing animals, or are animals abusing people? The drunkard looked at the pictures, and the cruel images made him uncomfortable. He placed the pictures back into the drawer before he finished them. When he pulled his hands back, he suddenly felt something sticky on his palms. With the help of the flashlight, the drunkard's eyelids twitched. The hand that he used to flip through the pictures was covered in dark red blood. Other than the pictures, I haven't touched anything. Could this blood have come from the pictures? Quote. Standing alone in the eerie building, there seemed to be something running back and forth in the corridor. The wind chime tinkled, and there was a human-headed monster that looked like a mop in the yard. In this situation, the drunkard did not dare to leave the room. The monster that dropped dog hair on the windowsill is on the second floor. This room is the furthest from the stairs, so it should be the safest room. He did not dare leave, afraid that the monster would be standing outside once he opened the door. However, staying inside the room made him panic. How could there be blood leaking out from the pictures? My hand probably accidentally brushed against the drawer. Perhaps there's a hidden compartment inside the drawer. Quote. Gathering his courage, the drunkard took out the drawer at the bottom of the table and placed it on the ground. This time, he saw it clearly. There were only pictures inside the drawer. Did the blood really come from the pictures? His attempt in real life had been turned upside down. His hair stood on end, and he had the urge to leave the room. His eyes fell on the pictures, and the drunkard noticed something strange. All the photos of people being tortured didn't show the faces of people, but in all the photos of animals being tortured, when the animals were dying, there would always be a hand strangling the animals' necks, as if they were showing off trophies, revealing the animals' faces. What a monster. Perhaps it was because he had looked at the pictures for a long time, but the drunkard realized that all the animals in the pictures seemed to be smiling. This is the first time I've seen this kind of expression on a dog's face. They should be smiling, right? A dog that can smile. The drunkard shivered. He did not dare get close to the pictures on the ground. He looked around, and the longer he stayed in this room, the scarier it became. For some reason, this building is scarier than the previous one. Placing his hand on the bed sheet, the drunkard wanted to wipe away the blood on his palm, but when his fingers moved, he felt like he was touching something. After hesitating for a while, he lifted the bedsheet, and a strong stench assailed his nostrils. On the mattress of the wooden bed, there was a pool of solidified human blood. Just from the shape of the mattress, it could be seen that the victim had died a painful death. Blood spurted out from the stomach, as if it had been pounced on by some wild beast and then bitten through the neck and stomach. The drunkard was just a salesman. He had never seen such a scene before. His body seemed to have been petrified, and his brain could not control his body at all. His scalp went numb, and there was a gust of air rushing out of his lungs. At the last moment, he bit his hand to prevent himself from screaming. Someone died in this room. Right here on this bed. Quote. These two thoughts flashed through his mind, and he did not dare to stay there any longer. For people who lived in a peaceful era, this was the closest a drunkard had ever been to words like death and murder. His eyes trembled, and it took him a long time to react. He tossed the bedsheet aside. His eyes looked down, and the faces of the animals in the pictures were imprinted in his mind. That dog is smiling, that dog is really smiling. I'm not mistaken. Quote. The drunkard was so scared that he was losing his mind, but that was not his fault. He had taken the bus drunk, and when he woke up, it felt like the world had changed. Everything here was something that he had not encountered before, not even in his nightmares. I have to leave, I can't stay here any longer. The drunkard leaned against the wall and walked to the window. He gripped the curtain, but he did not have the courage to pull it back. He was really scared. GG. With hesitation in his heart, the drunkard's legs were shaking. But sometimes, things were strange. The more afraid you were, the more strange things would happen. It was as if they knew the human heart's weakness. A strange sound came from somewhere in the room, like a mouse chewing on something. It sounds like it's coming from under the bed. The drunkard did not do that. He squatted down to look under the bed, and when the sound got louder, he pulled the curtain open. The bedroom window was already half open. Through the glass, when the drunkard looked out, a face was also looking in. Black hair that was stuck together like rags fell down, and the thin, pale face tried to squeeze into the room. Paw! The drunkard slammed the window shut with all his strength. The sound was loud, and his mind was blank. Closing the window earlier was a subconscious action. Through the thin glass, the human head stuck to the window. The cracked mouth slowly opened, and the broken teeth knocked against the glass like it was saying, I've finally found you. Locking the window, the drunkard felt like he had used up all his energy. He collapsed to the ground and lifted his head to look at the human head outside the window. Before he could recover, his pants were soaked with something, and the cold and sticky feeling was very uncomfortable. He was still in shock. He looked down and realized that he was sitting on top of the pictures, and a pool of blood was spreading on his pants. Widening his eyes, the drunkard saw that in all the pictures of animals being tortured, the animals' heads were missing, and black and red blood was leaking out from the animals' severed necks. The drunkard felt like he was suffocating. He scrambled to stand up. Bang! Bang! The human head slammed into the window. The drunkard did not dare to look back. He pushed himself up and ran out of the room. Help! Help! Where are the others? He came to the corridor and wanted to find another room to hide, but when he came out, he saw a shadow crawling at the corner of the second-floor staircase. It looked like a dog, but it also looked like a human. What's that? Not daring to get close to the stairs, the drunkard turned to hide in another room. Without looking, he closed the door. After locking it, he leaned against the door and gasped for air. For a normal person, the fact that he was not scared out of his wits was already a testament to his mental fortitude. No, I need to run out and meet up with the others. The drunkard thought about the other passengers. He pushed the table to the back of the door and started to look around the room. There was a gas stove, a refrigerator, and a large cupboard. Is this where they cook? The drunkard looked around, and sweat poured down his forehead. He ran into the kitchen of the two-story building, but the kitchen had no windows. It's over. The sound of glass shattering came from outside, and the wind chimes in the corridor grew louder. The drunkard refused to give up. Driven by his strong will to survive, he started to rummage through the kitchen for something useful. The kitchen was not that big, and the most eye-catching thing was the cupboard. It was filled with all kinds of delicious food, but they were all wrapped in plastic wrap, and most of them were already spoiled. There's a fridge, so why would they use the cupboard to store food? The situation was urgent, and the drunkard did not have time to think about these questions. He rushed to the stove and looked at the ventilation fan that was installed on the wall. This exit. It was unclear whether it was a purposeful design, or this family had a unique habit, but the ventilation fan installed in the kitchen was larger than normal. The vent was just big enough for a child to crawl in and out. The kitchen doesn't have a window, so they installed a large ventilation fan. The drunkard stepped on the chair. He tore the ventilation fan down with brute force. Looking at the vent, his expression wavered. The exit was too small for an adult. Once it got stuck, the consequences would be unimaginable. What should I do? Just as the drunkard was hesitating, he saw the cleaver that was placed on the chopping board. There were still traces of bone and blood on the blade. Raising his head to look at the vent and then lowering his head to look at the cleaver, a strange thought appeared in the drunkard's mind. It felt like this was all arranged by someone. The vent was very narrow for an adult, but if he chopped off his shoulder blades and cracked his hip bone, he should be able to crawl out easily. He reached out to grab the cleaver. The handle was sticky, and it made the drunkard feel disgusted. As if to urge him, just as he was hesitating, the sound of doors opening came from the corridor like someone was inspecting the rooms one by one. If I leave this place, who knows what kind of scary things I'll run into later. I'd be an idiot if I cut myself down. The drunkard gripped the cleaver with one hand. He bit on his lips and came up with an idea. I'll pretend to escape through the ventilation duct and then hide somewhere. When the owner comes to inspect the place, I'll make my escape. The drunkard looked around before walking to the fridge. The kitchen was not big, but it had a very large double fridge. The drunkard opened the top layer of the fridge, and it was filled with various deodorants and air fresheners. Some were unopened, and some had been used. Isn't this a bit too much? This was the first time he had seen someone use a fridge to store deodorants. He bent down to open the bottom layer of the fridge, and there were several black plastic bags inside. It can't be a dead body, right? The drunkard had no other choice. Only the fridge could hide people in the kitchen. He took out the black bag and shoved it into the top of the fridge. In the process, one of the bags slid open, and a dog's head fell out. There's dog meat in it. To cover his tracks, the drunkard picked up the dog's head from the floor. However, when he shoved the head into the top of the fridge, he accidentally caught a glimpse of the dog's face. His eyes were filled with fear. The more he looked, the more he felt that the dog's face resembled a human's. He couldn't tell why, but he felt that it was not a dog's head, but a frozen human face. This is so strange. Not daring to look at the dog head anymore, the drunkard shoved all the black bags into the top of the fridge. Bang! As soon as he was done, the lock on the kitchen door was twisted. After the other party tried a few times and realized that it couldn't be opened, he began to move more forcefully. The door shook, and the table behind it shook as well. We've been discovered. The drunkard placed the chair directly under the vent, then grabbed the knife and crawled into the lower fridge, closing the door behind him. The wooden door was slammed several times, but it still wouldn't open. The monster outside the door seemed to have given up. The footsteps slowly faded away, and the whole room instantly became quiet. The drunkard was shivering from the cold. He did not dare come out, afraid that this was a trap. About half a minute later, the footsteps returned, and then there was the sound of a key being pushed into the lock. The kitchen door that had been locked from the inside was pushed open, and the table was pushed to the side. It's here. The drunkard had no idea what the owner of the building looked like. Whenever he thought about the pictures that the owner had taken, he would panic. Footsteps came from the kitchen. Soon, the chair was pushed over, and the owner seemed to be investigating. Hopefully, I can trick him. The drunkard had a good idea, but just as that thought crossed his mind, the sound of the fridge door opening came from beside his ears. The door on the top of the fridge was pushed open, and the pile of black bags that he had shoved inside tumbled out. The drunkard's face paled instantly. He knew that he had been discovered. Get out of here. Perhaps the bone cleaver gave him the courage, but the drunkard slammed open the fridge door. A pile of dog meat entered his eyes, and the dog head that had a face that looked like a living person was placed before the drunkard. Even though he had mentally prepared himself, when he saw this, the drunkard was still spooked. His eyes moved, and the drunkard looked next to the dog head. Standing in the middle of the pile of dog meat was a person of unknown age. He was wearing a coat of dog skin, and the expression on his face was familiar to the drunkard. This face looks like the smiling dog in the picture. His body was cold, and he used all the energy in his body to crawl out from the bottom of the fridge. Without another word, he ran out the door. The dead dog has the same expression as a living person, but the living person has the same smiling face as the dog in the picture. This thought appeared in the drunkard's mind. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not have believed it. Is this a dead dog that has taken over a living person's body? Or has the dog swapped bodies with the human? Or is this some kind of curse? The curse of the smiling dog. Quote. The drunkard had no idea what was going through his mind. He ran like his life depended on it as he ran toward the room that he had first entered. In the face of something scarier, the thing that he had been afraid of before did not seem so scary anymore. The drunkard ran into the room, and when he turned the corner, he turned back to look. The strange man was on all fours, chasing after him like a rabid dog. The skin on his face was scrunched up, and he revealed a smile that was identical to the dog in the picture. Slamming the door shut, the drunkard jumped out the window. He did not dare turn back and ran out of the two-story building. Perhaps due to his fear, the drunkard did not stop even after he ran out of the building. He continued to run down the road for about 10 meters, and he only stopped when he was sure that no one was chasing him. What kind of monsters are these? How come it feels like every building is hiding monsters? Quote. The drunkard stood at the intersection. He looked left and right, and he suddenly realized that the bus that was supposed to be parked in the middle of the road had disappeared. Did I run in the wrong direction? The bus should have stopped at the previous intersection. The drunkard stood by the roadside. He did not dare get too close to the buildings. Compared to the buildings, the road is safer. I'll walk down the road and make some markings. The bus should be around here. Quote. The drunkard bent down and walked down the road. However, he did not walk for long when he suddenly saw someone waving at him. The visibility was very low in the blood fog, and he could only see a rough outline. Who is that? He looks familiar. Is he one of the passengers on the bus? The drunkard had just said that the streets were safer than the houses, but before he finished, something strange happened on the road. He suspected that there was a pair of eyes watching him from a place that he could not see, and his every move was being watched. Is he waving at me? The fog is so thick that I can't see his face, and he shouldn't be able to see my face either. In a situation like this, a normal person wouldn't actively greet someone. Quote. People were forced to do so. After the scary experience earlier, the drunkard had obviously become smarter, and he had started to think from a different perspective. The silhouette of the person in the fog slowly became clearer, and the person seemed to be walking toward him. No, I need to stay away from him. The drunkard could feel the person picking up speed, but he did not dare answer and turned to run. If he's a human, he should have opened his mouth to speak, but he's just waving without saying a word. There's something wrong with him. The road was not safe either. The drunkard's heart was filled with despair, and he did not know where to go. The most important thing now is to meet up with the other passengers. If I'm alone, I'll be toyed to death sooner or later. The drunkard ran for a while, but he did not see the bus. The more he ran, the more guilty he became. Oh no, I'm completely lost. The buildings around here all look the same, and the bus is my only point of reference. In the fog behind him, he could see a blurry figure. The person who had waved at him earlier was still following him, maintaining a distance from him. Damn it, what is this thing now? Why is it following me? The drunkard picked up his speed and ran to the next junction. The bus was still nowhere to be seen. Just as the drunkard was hesitating on which road to take, he suddenly realized that the silhouette of a person had appeared on the other side of the road, and someone was waving at him. How did that thing get ahead of me? He should be far away from me. Quote. Despair crawled up his heart like thorns. The drunkard did not know what to do. It felt like no matter where he went, he would run into that person. What should I do? His 30 years of life experience could not help him at that moment. The person on the other side of the road was still waving at him. The blurry silhouette and swaying arms looked like the pendulum of death. Even if I escape to another street, this monster will still follow me. There's no other way. I'll fight it. The drunkard gritted his teeth and gripped the cleaver he had brought from the kitchen of the kennel. He had never killed a chicken in his life, but at this moment, a cruel idea appeared in his mind. Calm down, don't be afraid. If one stayed in the blood fog for too long, one would be affected by it, but the drunkard himself did not realize that. The corners of his eyes were bloodshot, like he had stayed up for a long time. This was completely different from when he first got on the bus. Since it was his first time, the drunkard's heart raced. He gripped the cleaver with both hands and used an awkward posture to walk down the road. The silhouette was still waving at him, and the closer he got, the clearer the drunkard could see it. He looks so familiar. I think I've seen him somewhere before. Is he also a passenger on the bus? The drunkard walked to the middle of the road and yelled at the man, "Hey! What's your name?" Quote. There was no response. The man's wave became smaller, but he suddenly walked toward him. In the blood-red city, on an empty road, the two got closer and closer. As the man got closer, that familiar feeling appeared in the drunkard's heart again. This is too similar. I must have seen him somewhere before. The blood fog thickened. The drunkard gripped the cleaver tightly. He moved his feet and finally walked through the fog to stand before the man. The man was covered in blood, and his stomach was soaked. There was an obvious black line at the place where his legs and upper body were connected. It felt like his body had been separated and had been reattached by someone. Seeing the man's appearance, the drunkard wanted to retreat. He felt very scared, but the man gave him a strange sense of familiarity. He had to have seen this man somewhere before. Who are you? His mind was blank. The drunkard had no idea why the mirror would ask that question. His hand that held the cleaver kept shaking. This road is split into two, one for the living and the other for the dead. The strange man slowly raised his head. Under the messy hair was a face that looked exactly like the drunkard's. The eyes that were filled with venom and fear bulged outward. His body seemed to be supported by bones, and he leapt at the drunkard. His lips tore open, and a shrill voice that was completely different from the drunkard's came out from his throat. I am you, the one who will die a horrible death. Quote. When he saw that the monster looked like him, the drunkard's mental defense crumbled. He did not even have the intention to resist. He grabbed the cleaver and turned to run. This time, he did not even have the time to tell the direction. He felt like every nerve in his body was about to snap, and he used all his energy to run in a certain direction. He did not know where the destination was, and he did not know where the safest place was. He just ran as fast as he could. His whole body was sore, and his lungs burned like they were being burned. The world in his eyes slowly faded, and the drunkard felt like he could not breathe anymore. I can't run anymore. This was a completely hopeless world. The only choice for the living here was to enter different buildings and choose different ways of dying. No one can survive here. Everyone will die, everyone will die. His consciousness blurred, and the drunkard used his last breath to run into the building closest to him. The main color scheme was white. This appeared to be the only private hospital in Liwan City. It was not big, and it was just a small 3-story building. Daddy, shut up. The middle-aged man gasped for air. He hid inside the safety corridor and kept glancing out. Several minutes later, he did not hear any footsteps, so he leaned against the wall and slowly slumped to the ground. Earlier, I've seen disobedient passengers being sent into a door by the people inside the ghost apartment. Behind the door is like this place, filled with blood fog. This is not a place for the living. It's all that man's fault. If there's a chance, I'll make sure to kill him. Quote. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. Looking at the woman and the boy around him, he kicked the woman's leg. Ever since I married a mute like you, I haven't had a good day. The woman groaned like she was afraid of the man. She held her leg and took a step back, but she still stood in front of the boy to protect him. Daddy, don't f***c king call me that. You sound like a debt collector. The middle-aged man looked around, and his expression was not so good. I was too busy running for my life earlier. How did I end up running into a hospital? This is an unlucky place. After the monster leaves, we need to leave as soon as possible. Quote. Daddy, even though he was being annoyed, the boy kept calling his father. After being called several times, the middle-aged man finally realized that something was wrong. Normally, when he was angry, the boy would admit his mistake or be too scared to say anything. What's your name? Earlier, there was a little brother who stuck a piece of paper on your back. The boy pointed at the middle-aged man's back. On my back. The middle-aged man's hair stood on end. He reached behind him and pulled off a patient's record. The front of the record said that the patient was dead, and the back of the record said, "Come and find me."